Greetings. Hope you're doing well and staying safe. I'm really excited to present the first ever You Can't Unhear This interview with a special guest, Robin Mayhew, whose life intersected with the early days of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and continued in the 1970s working with David Bowie, Lou Reed, and many other artists. I hope you'll stick around as Robin has some amazing stories to share from his time in the music industry. And if you have any ideas for future interviews, let me know in the comments or shoot me an email. Without further ado, join me as I get to know Robin. Okay.
1, 2, 3. Testing.
First, before we even get started, I just wanted to ask you how you found my videos. You know, what do you think?
I had a screen of YouTube videos up, and I saw this one which tweaked me about the Beatles and who was singing this line and that sort of thing. And I just got interested and came and watched it through, and it just inspired me that somebody was looking back at all those things that were going on back in the day. So that's where we start, back in the day, yeah?
You were born the same year as John Lennon, in fact, I believe.
I think so, yeah.
Describe a little bit what it was like growing up in that era.
That takes me to the beginning now. I'd like to start. I mean, I show you this. This is mid-50s. Now, in the UK, in the mid-50s, just about thousands of boys picked up a guitar and started playing, including the Beatles. You know, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, they started strumming away because of Lonnie Donegan playing all these things like the Rock Island Line and all these other skiffle things. And then you had this invasion from America of like Little Richard and Jerry Lewis, and more obscure artists, Teddy Randazzo, Charlie Rich, these sort of things. And these guys strumming their guitars started to play this rock and roll, this blues and stuff. So you had this like beginning of amplifiers and electric music started, you know, and the Beatles too, in the Cavern Club, were playing away to their crowd, and they were doing all covers. And we were a covers band. I mean, we worked, we had regular jobs, all of us in the band. There we go there, the band. That was taken by Decca when they signed us, the picture they took for the release of our record. We were playing, 5 nights a week round the London clubs and pubs. We were earning more playing the clubs than we were with our jobs. So this is the Red Lion pub in Sutton. And this is a club we played every Friday night. And you can see how crowded it is. We'd get 300. The council would probably say it's good for 100 people, but we used to get like 300 in there, rammed. And Ian Stewart, who was the 6th Rolling Stone, he was a good buddy of ours. He lived in Cheam, just round the corner from the Red Lion. And he was playing with Keith Richards and Jagger and Brian Jones. And our bass player, Colin, who was our bass player then, sat in with them and played with them and begged us to play it. So we let them play a few Friday nights there. So the promoter booked the Stones and us, managed to fill the hall. But can you see the price? 5 and 6? That's about 50 cents to get in to see the Stones, man. I have to say this, it was deserted. But then the Stones, it started to write their own stuff, which was the secret. Same as the Beatles. They started to write their own stuff, so they started to make a name for themselves. So it was very tempting, but we didn't write our own stuff. We blew it.
Now, I mean, a lot of groups at the time were doing mostly covers, R&B covers. I mean, I think the Rolling Stones, their first album was mostly cover songs that they had heard. So it seemed pretty normal to do that, right? I mean, it seemed everybody wanted to hear the familiar songs.
Yeah, but the Stones, here we are.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see that. I Want to Be Your Man, written by the Beatles, and Come On, which was Chuck Berry or somebody. So they picked up on that, and the Beatles passed them a number, and whoosh, if the Beatles had passed us a number, I probably wouldn't be here.
So speaking of passing a number to another band, so your group, the Presidents, did Candyman.
Yeah, we recorded it with Glyn Johns, who was an old school buddy of mine, and he had started work as a tape op at IBC Studios in London, and he would invite us up at the weekend to have a go mixing and stuff. And he heard our version of Candyman, and he said, "Well, let's record it." So we recorded it, and he gave it to Decca, and they signed us immediately. And then apparently Decca played it to their top band of the day, Brian Poole and the Tremolos, and they cut it and released it, forcing us to release ours as a B-side.
How'd that make you guys feel?
We were disgusted, but we carried on. We enjoyed playing, and we did it. And then, shortly afterwards, two of the guys left, and we recruited a new guitarist, and I started singing. And then, still signed to Decca, we recorded Roddy Jackson and the late Sonny Bono's song, She Said Yeah, with Glyn Johns. He gave it to Decca, and we never heard a thing. And we didn't know, we carried on for a few months, but then we just gave up. But then, Ray, I had this email from Alec Paloa in Los Angeles, and he said, "I found the acetate in Shal Talmay, the legendary producer, in his collection," and he worked for Decca in the mid-'60s, and they played it to Roddy Jackson, and he gave it the thumbs up, and it got released in 2018, 53 years late.
A little girl, where did you come from? You fight a little bit, you make your mama say, "Come on, baby, let me buy the wedding ring."
Did you have a copy of it yourself before they found this acetate, or was this first time you heard it in 50 years?
No, we had nothing.
That's remarkable.
The acetate was given to Decca, and we never had a thing. We used to play it live, but we never heard the acetate till we got it in 2018.
So that must have been remarkable to hear it after all those years.
Oh, it was fantastic. And I got the band back together. The guitarist, Martin, who lives in Australia, was over here for a summer holiday, and I managed to get us all together, and we made the video, which you've probably seen on YouTube.
She said yes. She said yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Come on, baby, I wanna make love you too.
Lip sync's not bad after 53 years.
Yeah, I would have believed it was live. I mean, it was good.
Oh, good for you. Good.
So, were you ever considering writing original songs with the Presidents? Were any of you songwriters?
We got some demos from somebody who was writing music, but we couldn't make head or tail of it, And we were just hopeless. We didn't do it.
Were you always musically inclined as a child, or?
My mother always played the piano. My sister played the piano. My mother would always be singing. So there was this, always music in the house. But when Lonnie Donegan hit the scene and I was in my teens, I just had to get a guitar go. And so it just developed from that,
What were some other, groups that people might know that you either played with at the time, or you listened to, or you went to concerts by?
On the same circuit we did, there was a band called the Detours, who became the Who. I mean, and I tell you a little story. We were at the Oldfields Hotel, Greenford, doing our gig, and the Who the Detours had a night off, and they were in the bar, and we were talking with them, and Pete Townsend says, "We're renaming the band." I said, "What are you calling it?" He said, "The Who." I said, "The what?" He said, "No, The Who." And he said, "That's why we're doing it, because everyone says The Who."
Let's talk about the end of the Presidents. What happened? You reformed, you said, and knew some new members, but then what happened?
Yeah, after we recorded She Said Yeah, and we heard nothing, and we carried on, and we probably carried on for 3 or 4 months, and then just said, no, let's just give it up. We were tired of it.
When was this? 1965?
65. My father had bought a business from my mother's uncle in Cape Town. So we upped sticks and went as a family. Just before we went, I got engaged to my lovely wife, Margaret. Went out there. Sadly, my father died just after we got there. But my mother and my sister and her husband, we all got together and managed to get it running. Then I sold my Gibson SG guitar to get the ticket to fly home to get married. Got married, and Marty and I returned to Cape Town. We lived for a year, and then we got very fed up with apartheid and the way the country was run. It was dreadful.
You came back to the UK.
Yeah.
And by this point, the music scene had changed quite a bit. This is what, 1967 or so. That's the Beatles are doing their psychedelic stuff, and that's all become the rage. What were your impressions coming back to the UK at that time versus when you'd left?
I remember my original bass player, the one who played with the Stones a couple of times, and Ian Stewart. We got together and we played a few things, like in a church hall somewhere. And I went round to the bungalow, which was originally rented by the Stones in Epsom, where Ian Stewart used to live, and met this guy, Nicky Graham. And Nicky Graham was with a band called The End, but they had just formed Tucky Buzzard. And Bill Wyman, because of the connection, was going to produce their new album, which is called Warm Slash. Nicky said, I said, I haven't got a job at the moment, and we were chatting, and he said, look, we need a roadie because we're getting a new PA system. I said, well, okay, I'll give it a shot. We did a very short tour of Europe, Spain and Germany, and a couple of gigs in France, came back to England and came to America. And Tucky Buzzard signed with Tony DeFries, who had just signed David Bowie. I knew Space Oddity, David Bowie, but I had no interest whatsoever. Tony DeFries, who was managing Bowie and Tucky Buzzard, said, we're laying on this gig for some record executives to listen to David's material. He said, well, Tucky Buzzard, you warm it up. So we did that, and we set the PA up, and we did our set. Now, Tucky Buzzard were pretty heavy metal. We did about 4 numbers, and which were great. Came off, but we couldn't leave. We had to wait there. And David, who had very long hair and big flared trousers and all the rest of it, got on stage to do his bit, and it was very poor. A lot of feedback, howl and whistle and noise, and just terrible. And they finished, and then we started to pack our gear away, and I had this knock on the shoulder, and it was Angie Bowie. And she said, can you come and talk to David? And so I said, okay. So he said, how the hell could I hear what your singer was singing with all that noise going on? I said, well, it's just me and the PA. And, He said, I'm putting a band together. We're going to go on tour. We're going to do a rehearsal. DeFries said, yeah, go and do it. So we went to Beckenham Rugby Club, set the PA up. And when Bowie walked in, totally transformed. He had his red mullet, totally different. And it was like, whoa, And anyway, no sound check. We just went straight into the opening of the set, did about 4 numbers. And God, I don't know. The combination of the PA and the performance of the band and my skills, it just worked. Mind you, let me just point out, I did say to them, and with Tucky Buzzard as well, instead of having all your gear stacked up, which was all the norm in those days, like the Who had piles of amplifiers and speaker cabinets. Yeah, I said, no, let's have it all low down, cabinet side by side, one cabinet here, so the microphone is clear. And it worked. And so, thank you. I got the gig.
So this is 1971? 71. And, this system that you were working with, the sound system, the PA system,
Yeah.
what was so different about it from what was normally used, and why was that so bad? I think a lot of people today are used to, very, very sophisticated PA systems, but back then it was a little different, right?
Because of Bowie's theatrical presentation, it wasn't hard rock, it was theatre, And so people, when they came to the gig, they could hear everything. It wasn't all just, you weren't stuck against the back wall because the volume was so high. It was comfortable and full range, It was, there weren't horns shouting at you, screaming at you. It was all nice and, just, it was a perfect mix for the Ziggy Stardust and Aladdin Sane ethos, it just made it work.
Had you listened to the record before this, or did you just kind of show up, these were the first time you'd heard these songs, and then you figured it out live?
No, at that rehearsal, it was the first time I'd ever heard them. And they played Hang On To Yourself, Ziggy Stardust, three or four numbers they did, but I'd never heard them. But funny you should say that, Ray, because at the Gem headquarters, before Main Man was formed, De Vries was working at Gem. He came to me one day and he said, "Here, Robin, sit down, check the lyrics to the Ziggy Stardust album, because we want to make sure they're right." He gave me the typed lyrics and the acetate, and I played it and listened. And this is honest to God, in Ziggy Stardust, I heard Leper, Messiah, with a P, and it said leather. And I said, no, it's Leper. So I changed it to Leper, and David's always sung after that.
Really?
So, yeah.
That's a fun...
And I didn't understand what a water wall was. So in Rock and Roll Suicide, when he says the water wall, I thought he said wall to wall, as in carpet. So I changed the lyric to wall to wall. So I'm responsible for some of Bowie's lyrics.
Sometimes it is hard to understand what his songs are actually saying, because he uses such, dense imagery and metaphorical lyrics. So that's really funny that you even were suggesting lyrics.
I heard it as Leper Messiah, and I thought that's a wonderful, the leper and the Messiah.
That makes more sense, actually.
Yeah,
that's
leather Messiah. Okay, on reflection, you get a guy all dressed in leather and he's a god, but Leper Messiah. Anyway, there we go.
Wow, so you have that's a big claim to fame for sure.
I've never received a royalty for it.
Well, so you stayed with Bowie throughout the Ziggy Stardust tour then?
We did Japan. We never did Europe. We did the UK, the United States, and Japan.
I think it's the last show of that tour, or one of the last shows, was made into a film. That's the one where David says, "This is the last show we'll ever do." Do you remember that night? Oh, yeah, there you go. Look at that. That's it.
Not only is it the last show of the tour, but it's the last show that we'll ever do.
Well, now, Mick Ronson, guitarist, the late Mick Ronson, he always insisted that I recorded the show every night for band review. Just in case of any hiccups, he could reflect, oh, yeah. If something went wrong, he would just say, hey, it would be a laugh. "Hey, man, you slipped up there, I heard it, and listen." And it would just be over in a moment. There was never any bad feeling. But when we got to the last... but then, like an idiot, I would record over the show the next night, and the next night, and the next night. So it got to the last night, and I recorded the show, and then he said it's the last show we'll ever do, but there it is. There it is. When it finished at Hammersmith Odeon that time, we went to the Cafe Royal afterwards, and it's always stuck in my mind because Mick Jagger was there with Bianca, David was with Angie, and I went to say goodbye to David, and Mick Jagger was really rude. He went, yeah, at me, you know. I said, I'm sorry, I'm just saying goodbye to David, you know. I wish I'd said to him, it was me that let you come in the Red Lion back in the day, but I never did.
That would have been funny. I wonder if he would have remembered. I mean, that's...
Oh, I think he would have done, yeah.
That must have been a very wild experience to be traveling with David Bowie as he's becoming very famous.
Oh, it was a roller coaster. I mean, it really was. And David didn't like flying. So to come from the East Coast to the West Coast, we ended up, when I say we, the band and the crew ended up in the Beverly Hills Hotel for 10 days with room service and the whole thing. Just crazy. But it was an absolute roller coaster. As I said, the first gig we ever did was a pub, and then a few universities, and then within just a few months, we were doing big venues, you know, and audience. We were just all captivated by it, and every night was just a thrill to do. I remember Peter Hunsley and I, we commandeered all the printers at Gem, and we got a photograph of the band, David, and we printed all these A4s off. And at those early gigs, when he did Wham Bam Thank You Man on Suffragette City, we'd throw them up in the audience, and they'd all come down, and people would just grab them, and it was just amazing, you know.
What was David like during that tour? I mean, he must have also been overwhelmed and surprised by the success.
I think he was, as you just said, stunned by it. I mean, I don't think he could believe it, that this was happening. This persona was just taking off. But he did the right thing at the end. I mean, there was no point in being Ziggy Stardust any longer. He'd made it. He'd got there. And I had when he announced it, I thought, good on you. What a sensible thing to do, you know. After I'd said goodbye to him, then we did the 1980 floor show at the Marquee, and that was the last I worked with him.
Had you heard from him at all after that?
Yeah, he did. He played piano, keyboard on the Iggy Pop tour when Iggy Pop came to England, and I was engineering a band called the Vibrators, a punk band. So about 1976, and David came up to the mixer during sound check, and we had a long talk, and that was the last time I spoke with him.
Rest in peace too. I mean, he's now been gone
exactly
4 or 5 years now. I mean, it's unbelievable, but
yeah,
our lasting impact, no doubt. So the Ziggy Stardust tour ends. What's your next step? I mean, were you planning to work with David again, or did you want to work with other artists?
No, I was. It was extraordinary because I'd met Lou Reed working with David, and after David finished, I formed Ground Control. Went on from there, and I started engineering. First of all with Lou Reed, then with Mott the Hoople, who obviously David was connected to with all the young dudes. And then we did one tour with Blondie, her first tour of the UK. And there are all these other bands, like the punk bands, the Stranglers. all that sort of stuff was going on. And then there was David Essex. I don't know if you know that name. I mean, he had Rock On, a big hit in America. But I was doing sound for all these people. I had a wonderful, wonderful time.
Lou Reed's an interesting character in rock music history. Was your experience with him, what was it like?
Absolutely great. That whole time I worked with Lou, he was, as far as I could see, absolutely straight, and just concentrating on doing his the best he could for the show. So there you go, and that is this. Yeah, this is one of my recordings of Lou at the Felt Forum in New York, and then at Dayton, Ohio.
What was the last concert that you worked on? And then what was your next step after that?
The last tour I worked on was with David Essex, promoting his, I'm going to make you a star and all that sort of stuff. He was a big star in the UK at that time. But after that, as you say, we packed up and we opened my wife and I, Marty, opened a shop. We went into retail, doing like a gift shop, doing home ideas and gifts. We ran that for a couple of years. Then we moved to Scotland and bought a guest house right on the River Tweed, and we had like salmon fishing and this sort of thing. So we had people coming in. We were so lucky we had the money to buy this place outright and do it.
I mean, did you miss being on the road at all? Did you miss working in music?
Not really. I'd really had enough of that. It was, I toured and all that. Hardly seen my boys while I was on tour for the whole 1970s. Hardly saw them,
Let's talk about some of the newer stuff you've been writing. So, I've listened to some of the songs, and I mean, all of it seems to have a very positive and sort of energizing, upbeat feel to it. Is that a reflection of your own state of mind?
I just miss. I just miss the simple rock and roll, if you like.
Do you still stay in touch with the other guys from the Presidents?
Yes, Eddie, our old drummer. I spoke to him just yesterday. He lives quite close. Tony Finch, he's got Parkinson's, and he doesn't really talk very much. Ricky Tyrrell, the original singer who did Candyman, I email with him probably 2 or 3 times a week. So we're in touch, but dear Tony Busson, the bass player, as I said, died last February. And he was the closest one to us. He just lives a few miles away, or lived a few miles away.
And do any of them still play or perform?
We have done a few things together. If on YouTube, there's one of my songs with Ollie, my son, helping out on guitar, and Tony and Eddie and me playing. More Love Required, it's called. And, I just think a bit more love in the world is what we need. Music is a wonderful thing. It's whether you're listening to classical music or rock and roll, it's a leveling thing, and it can do so much for you.
Well, this has been a real treat. Thank you so much, Robin. I appreciate you spending this time.
Well, thanks for your time
talking to me, and I think my audience is gonna really appreciate hearing these incredible stories from your life. But
well, I hope so.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Good luck with all of your music and all of your new endeavors, and hope you continue to make some incredible tracks.
Thanks very much. I shall do my best. Watch this space.
Take care, and if you're interested in Robin's music, please check out the links that'll be in the description below the video.
Thank you.
And listen to his work. It's awesome. It's quite a story.
She said yes. She said yes. She said yes.